And just kind of not the best way to do this stuff. We can create the DOM elements as actual objects and add them to the DOM without using inner HTML. So how might we do that? Well, the DOM has a function called document.createElement. How does that work? Let's look it up. JS document create element. Let's go to the Googles. So the first result is developer.mozilla.org. That would be the Mozilla Developer Network, or MDN, which is always a good resource for looking up how stuff in the DOM works. Right underneath that is W3 Schools, which is also a pretty good resource for all that stuff. They document absolutely everything in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript too, or at least the vast majority of it. And sometimes those tutorials are a little more accessible and slightly less thorough. Let's look at the MDN for this. Create element. In an HTML document, the document create element method creates the HTML element specified by tag name or an HTML unknown element if tag name isn't recognized. Cool. The syntax. Document.createElement tag name. And then it looks like optionally you could pass in some options. So let's try it out. Document.createElement. Let's create a div. And I suppose I should probably save that to a variable. Let my div equal document create element div. Undefined, that's okay. Assignment is always undefined. But what about my div? Did it work? Hey, it's a div. Now when I hover over it, I don't see it on the page, do I? Also, there's nothing inside the div. Let's put something inside the div. Now that we have it as an object, we didn't have to use query selector. We just created it from scratch. We could totally say myDiv.textContent, right? Probably. Now let's look at my div. Hey there. Cool. But it's not on the page. This is just a DOM element or node floating in the ether. It's not on the page. So how can we add it to the page? What we can do is append it as a child of some other element on the page. To the body, if you just want it to be at the very end of the body, or if you want it to be inside, say, this div, you could do that too. We know how to grab that, right? We could say let stats equal document.querySelector hash stats. So now we have stats. And that's this div that's actually on the page. And we have my div, which is this div that isn't anywhere. And we could say stats dot appendChild, which does what it sounds like. It takes the child that we pass it and appends it, that is, puts it at the end of stats, leaving everything that's already in there alone. And there we go. Now, the variable myDiv, is that the one? Is that actually pointing to the one on the page? If we hover over it, it does highlight it. Can you wait just one second, just like 30 seconds? Thanks. It is the one that's on the page. It's because objects in JavaScript are passed by reference. We'll make this point a few other times, but my variable doesn't hold a copy of the one that's on the page. It is the one that's on the page, not just one that's exactly like it. Yeah, go ahead, Celine. Sorry.
I was wondering, like, this console thing doesn't actually do, like, I'm just making sure what it's functioning is. So it doesn't change any of the website's actual elements, but it lets us mess around with it on the browser.
It's not going to actually change the file, if that's what you mean. So, I mean, it's definitely changing the contents of the document in memory. But yeah, we're not rewriting the actual HTML. We're just messing with the DOM, which is, again, the browser's internal representation of the page, which it creates from the HTML, but it's not the HTML.
Okay, so if we refresh, like, right now,
All that goes away. Yes, everything we've done goes away. Yep. Yeah, Roy. Because I wasn't sure whether I was going to want to reassign them in the console. You know, I'm not writing it in a file. So a couple times doing things in class, I wish I had used let in the console just because sometimes I want to reuse that same variable as something else. That's all. Yeah, nothing deep there. So now that we see that we can do that, how could we do that same thing in our code instead of using inner HTML? So if we want the name and the age to be inside a paragraph still, we could create that paragraph as an actual DOM node. We can call it p, const p equals document dot create element, and we just pass it the type of element in quotes as a string p. Doesn't matter that my variable happens to be exactly the same as the tag name. It just kind of made sense to do that. But this could say paragraph or whatever. So now I've got an empty paragraph, right? But we don't want it to be empty. We want it to have the name and the age in it. So we could say p dot text content this time equals, and then we could still use a template string with the backticks instead of quotes and say name, comma, age, interpolation, age, like that. And now we have this paragraph that actually has some text, but it's still not on the page. It just exists in JavaScript. So to get it on the page, we have our stats div up here. So we could say stats dot appendChild and pass it our new paragraph. And again, this is faster than using inner HTML. Inner HTML is kind of slow. Also, it just kind of feels better structurally. Was that what you were going to ask? Why? Okay.
I was going to ask, like, in mine, I tried to do something, like, I changed the font or something of the thing that I displayed. So could we add, like, an ID through JavaScript to this page?
So we didn't do the super mega bonus credit hyperfighting yet, right? Where we actually changed the style. Yeah. So let's remember to do that in just a second. Let's see if this works. Don't forget to refresh. So you have your new code. Name. Burn. page. How old have you been? 91. Very good. Ben. Still works. Very good. I like it. Now we're using createElement and appendChild instead of using inner HTML. We haven't changed the functionality of the thing at all, but we changed the way we did it. So again, we accomplished a little something, so I'm going to commit that much. Add to tell Git about our changes. Commit to stick a label on those changes so that it has a place in our history. Append the stats as a proper DOM element. And push that.